love life? Do you love life? Do you really love life? Do you love life?
Welcome to the We Love Life podcast. Together we'll explore how the church is being united and mobilized to create a culture of love and life. Through inspiring conversations with pastors, ministry leaders, and business owners, we'll dive into stories of transformation, faith in action, and the incredible impact that happens when the church comes together to shine the light in the darkest places in our world. Join us as we learn how God is moving through His people to create a culture of love and life that will bring an end to abortion and the orphan crisis. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the We Love Life podcast. My name is Daniel Parks, and I serve as Executive Director for Love Life. And I'm blessed to bring this episode to you guys. Appreciate all of you guys that are listening. Want to encourage you guys to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with others that you think would be blessed by it. We bring these episodes to you just to show what God is doing through the body of Christ, through the church, through pastors that are standing for life. And we have an amazing man of God that's going to be sharing his story and sharing a little bit about his church and what his church is doing in their community to stand for life. I think it's going to be a blessing to you guys. I want to encourage you also to check us out on the internet, of course, lovelife.org, and you can reach out to us. I'll give our email address at the end of this episode. But we'll jump right into this episode. I have Pastor Jay Smith of Cedar Park Church here. And Pastor Jay, appreciate you and your wife, Sandy. We've had some relationship with you guys for a while. I think we started that relationship. You and I talked about it before we jumped on and started recording this episode, that we met actually in front of an abortion clinic in Washington State there, doing what we call 1 hour journey. We invited you guys to come out and join us for prayer for an hour out in front of the abortion center in Everett. And I think that's the first time we met.
Yeah.
And then from there, we did a conference at you guys' church, which was pretty amazing. And you guys have just been amazing to us as a ministry, super encouraging to us. So, yeah, man, if you can just introduce yourself, introduce a little bit about your church, and then we'll dive into sharing you guys' story.
For sure. Yeah, it's a joy to be on with you. Thanks for the invite and the opportunity to sit down. I will never forget the day that we met. Yeah, you were awesome, but it's not anything to do with you. But that day that we were invited to be a part of that 1 hour journey, I don't think any of us really knew would also be the day that Roe v. Wade being overturned was announced. And
Right.
to be standing outside of an abortion clinic in our area praying for the end of this terrible atrocity, tragedy that abortion has been on the day that was announced. Man, it was so encouraging, I think. So yes, for sure. So my wife and I were a part of that day, but we are here at Cedar Park Church. We're in Bothell, Washington. I know there's a Cedar Park somewhere in Texas, and people say, "Oh, you're from Texas." No, we're not from Texas. We identify as Texas up here in the Pacific Northwest, but
Amen.
yeah, so we have been a part of the church. Both of us actually grew up in the church. We can get into that a little bit later, but had the joy of serving in the role of senior pastor here for about 10 years. And man, it's an amazing church. We run a Christian school that we've been running for about the last 40 years. It happens to be I think the largest private school in our state. We've got 3 campuses and about 2,400 students. We're passionate about planting churches in the area. We currently have about 9 branch campuses of our church, and our model is to empower local church planters and support them by a connected relationship. But it's a great church. We love it. We raised our family here. My wife and I were both raised here, and it's a joy to be serving the Lord here in our community. We're in the great Northwest, the Pacific Northwest, and so if there's anybody who's like, you want to be a missionary and you want to be a part of fighting the darkness, come on up, join us.
Amen. Man, I love the Pacific Northwest for the hiking and the just being out in the woods there is so amazing.
Yeah, there's nothing like
man, it. There is some darkness there for sure. I mean, there's darkness everywhere across the United States, but it does seem like there's a particular spiritual darkness that sort of looms over that area, and you guys are certainly a light in the midst of the darkness. Your church is just amazing, standing for the Lord and standing for life, which is kind of rare in Washington State. I mean, maybe I'm wrong from the East Coast looking out there, but Is it true though? Kind of rare that a church would take a stance like you guys have taken.
We have discovered in the last several years as we've really leaned in and become more and more overtly, not just a church with pro-life ministries, but a pro-life church. We've discovered a lot of friends in the area, and we obviously, I think there are fewer churches here in our area than other parts of the country.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have a reputation for a reason as a region. Politically, it is very left, and it seems like our state Senate and legislature and all statewide leadership from the governor's office on down are just running as fast as they can towards oblivion. But there are strong churches, and there are a lot of believers in the area standing firm, and we count it a great privilege to be an encouragement to other pastors and other leaders in the area. But we got our work cut out for us. There's a lot of churches that have just decided that biblical truth is less important to them than cultural relevancy. Which is a terrible way to try to gain influence, because it's just going to evaporate as soon as culture changes and moves another direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know for me, so I'm an East Coast guy. I've been here in the Charlotte area my whole life, just like you were born and raised there in Washington State, born and raised here in the Bible Belt. And I'll just be honest with you, looking from the East Coast to the West Coast, California in particular, it's like, man, those people are crazy. There's no churches there that are solid, that are preaching the gospel, whatever. And then I go out there,
oh man,
and I find, man, there's so many pastors, so many churches. I mean, there's more conservative believers, more believers in Jesus in California than probably any other state. It's just there's also a lot more leftists and people that are not speaking the truth.
There's more people in California than any other state, and so you're going to have all kinds. Yeah, and I think that's the thing. People say we've taken some road trips across this great, amazing country that we live in, and you get somewhere into the middle of the heart of this country, and people ask, "Oh, where are you guys from?" And we learned pretty quickly not to say we're from Seattle.
Right.
Because people go, "Oh, I'm sorry," or "Oh, what are you doing here? You better get out." We say, "We're from Washington State." But there are so many wonderful people, and I feel like in places where there's a reputation for darkness, it just causes people who love the Lord, who stand on biblical truth, to just be a little bit more distinct, and it helps us identify who each other are. In fact, just last week, we were introduced by a common friend, Seth Gruber. We've had him speak at our church a couple of times, and there's another church in our area that had invited Seth to speak, and so Seth texted us both, said, "Do you guys know each other?" And we said, "We don't." And so Seth goes, "You need to get together." So just last week, we got together with these other pastors who are, maybe about an hour away from us, and just discovered how much we're holding the line together, how much we have in common, and it's encouraging, because I think, there's a lot of darkness, but when we meet brothers and sisters that are just all about standing for biblical truth, whether it's on the issue of human sexuality, or whether it's on the issue of life, or you name it, any other biblical authority, you just go, okay, I know who we're working with here, and it's a huge encouragement.
Yeah. God always has a remnant, no matter where it's at, man. Whether it's Washington State or Charlotte, North Carolina, or Saudi Arabia, right? God always has a remnant of people, for sure. You said something earlier that I want to dig into, if it's okay. You said, as a church, we have become a pro-life church rather than just a church with pro-life ministries.
Yeah.
Can you dig into that a little bit, man? Just kind of break that down.
Yeah, for sure. This is a church that has been around. It was planted in 1970. I was born in 1978. So the church is 8 years older than I am. And it has always been a church that has stood for life. And it's always been, even if it's brought the church into political waters, we've always stood for life. We've had, prayer rallies. We've had people sharing. And so that's the church that we grew up in. But it was, in 2018 that really this important stance for life kind of became a little bit more front and center for us. And we've been involved in challenging our state via a lawsuit that has forced an abortion mandate on all health insurance plans in our state. And so we're working in conjunction with partnership with Alliance Defending Freedom, who does a tremendous job representing, our church as an employer being forced to pay for abortion coverage for employee health plans. So during a lot of that, it caused us to look at every level of our church and organization at this area of seeing that we're not just a church that has pro-life action, but everything that we do is in support of life. I mean, our youth ministry is a pro-life youth ministry. Our kids ministry is a pro-life kids ministry. Our Christian school is a pro-life ministry. And it's like looking at it and really challenging, not just how are we going to integrate, once a year, we're going to read a statement or something along those lines. We want to do those things, but throughout all of the year, how is it that we are, how is it that because this battle of opposing abortion and the cultural acceptance of it, I mean, if the church isn't involved in this, then what in the world is the church doing? So for us, it's like, hey, we want to look at it at every level, every ministry, every small group, every employee, every place. Hey, how are we making this central to who we are? It's not political. The fact that it's central to everything the church does just reinforces that this is a spiritual conviction that gets lived out in politics. It gets lived out in culture. It gets lived out in small groups. It gets lived out in ministries. But I think a lot of it is a mindset of us just coming to a place like, we are a pro-life church because Jesus is a pro-life Messiah. He says, I have come that you might have life and have it to the fullest. And of course, he's pointing us in the direction of eternal life, but you don't get to the place of leading people towards eternal life if their lives never begin in the first place, or if their lives shortly after they begin are eliminated through abortion or other means. Yeah, that's good, man. So one of the analogies I've used in the past, obviously we're supposed to proclaim the gospel. We're going to proclaim the gospel. That's the charge that Jesus has given to the church to go and make disciples. But, if you're living in a neighborhood and you have a neighbor on your right, a neighbor on your left, a neighbor on your right, well, they don't know Jesus. They need to know the gospel. The neighbor on your left, they may or may not know Jesus, but their house is on fire. It's like, you need to go try to rescue the neighbors whose house is on fire, and then you can go share the gospel with them and the other neighbor. But this is like, life and death situations are something we've got to give attention to for sure. That's a good analogy. And you guys are doing an amazing job of standing for life there. And I know it's personal for you guys. I know a little bit about your story. I know when we did the conference, your wife, Sandy, who is also your worship leader there, if I'm not mistaken, is that right? She's one of our worship leaders. She has been in the role of overseeing it, but she oversees our weekend gatherings and services. Yeah, definitely. She's a tremendous worship leader. Yeah, she did an amazing job at that conference. That she shared her testimony. She shared you guys' testimony. And I shared before we started recording a little bit of my testimony. It's kind of similar. Me and my wife were high school sweethearts. She got pregnant unplanned, and it really wrecked our lives, but in a good way. And it's kind of you guys' story too. So I'd like for you to share a little bit of that. Of course, it ties into your church and your church's stance for life. So if you could share that. Yeah. My wife and I, we like to start out by saying we met in church, the very church that we pastor now, but we met in the nursery as 3-year-olds. When you tell people you met your wife in the nursery at church, you get some weird looks. You say, no, we were babies. So yeah, my parents had been a part of the church when it was planted, meeting in a public school elementary gymnasium. And about 10 years into the church plant, the founding pastor left to go pastor and plant churches elsewhere, and a new pastor was brought in, and that was my wife's father. Okay. Pastor Joe Featon, a tremendous just man of God and huge influence in our region, fearless leader. And so my wife was 3 years old at the time. And so my wife and I grew up knowing each other. Our families have been close, family vacations, we'd have them over to our house. They'd have us over to their house. And my dad served off and on over the many years of the church as a deacon, and her father as the pastor here for 35 years. So we grew up together. We started dating in high school. and as high school sweethearts, just like you were saying you and your wife were. And we love the Lord. I mean, we're raised in an amazing church. I'll say this church, like, this is in the 80s and 90s, the kind of place where we were standing on the front lines of issues like life and issues like marriage and human sexuality. And this is the church we were raised in. Like, we took purity pledges and went through a youth group and all that kind of stuff. And we loved the Lord. I mean, it was real and sincere, but there's one thing to love the Lord, and there's another thing to be filled with wisdom and common sense.
Yeah.
And I just like to say it like this: I loved Jesus with all my heart, but I was as stupid as the day was long. And my wife and I just had some unhealthy or lack of boundaries that we had placed in our relationship. And so,
Sure.
At 18, and I'd felt a call of ministry on my life, and was just graduated high school, enrolled for Bible school in the fall, and my wife was my girlfriend at the time, ended up getting pregnant. So 18-year-old, my dad's a deacon, her dad's the pastor.
Yeah.
We're serving, we were volunteer leaders in our youth ministry. We were involved in helping to lead worship as musicians. I mean, we called into ministry, all these things, and all of a sudden, the whole world comes to this crashing halt. And my wife's perspective on the story, for her to tell it, definitely has a lot more, power to it. And you mentioned at the Love Life conference we hosted here in, I think, 2022, she was able to share that testimony. But, for her to come to the place discovering that she was pregnant, you just think that's the end of the world. Well, for us, we loved each other. It wasn't just like a one-night stand or a fling or something like that. We loved each other, and we had already talked, after college, we wanted to get married, and, and obviously didn't set ourselves up for success towards that plan. And so when she sat down with her parents and told them that she was pregnant, that was a big deal. And her dad said to her, well, what do you want to do? And she said, well, and she's thinking, I'm 18. I'm a kid myself. I can't raise a child. She says, I think I want to give the baby up for adoption. And her dad said to her, well, that baby is your responsibility. That's your baby. And I think you should raise this baby. And so for her, she had never considered the fact that as a child herself, or as an 18-year-old, that she could raise a child. But hearing her dad say, this is your baby, it's you have this responsibility, something flipped in her, like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
Okay, my parents are going to support me. She said to her dad in that moment, then I want to get married. And he says, whoa, time out. Knowing that's not always the answer. That's not the answer. He says,
Sure.
well, that's not your choice to make. That's not something that you just decide. And he didn't know at that time that the two of us had already, before knowing any of this, talked that we loved each other, we wanted to be married, and we had said, down the road. And so, I had the opportunity to sit down with my pastor, who had been my pastor my entire life that I can remember from age 3 on. A tremendous man of God that I respect, and under the circumstances, knowing that his daughter was pregnant because of me, to be able to sit down with him and to tell him that I loved his daughter and that I wanted to marry her, and I wanted to build a life together and raise a family. And I was asking I said, these aren't the circumstances that I would hope that it would have taken place, but I want to ask for your permission to marry your daughter. And I said to him, I want you to know that I'm going to take care of my family. I said, I'm enrolled for Bible school in the fall, and obviously that plan is out the window, because deacons' kids who get pastors' daughters pregnant aren't the kind of people that God calls into ministry. I said, so I'm just going to set that aside. That's obviously not God's plan for my life. I'm just going to drop out of Bible school. I'm going to get a job, and I'm going to support my family. And he says to me, he goes, well, I'm in support of you marrying my daughter, but you're not dropping out of school, and you're not the one who calls yourself into ministry, and that's up to God. So you just need to be faithful along the way, see what doors God opens up down the road, but you don't need to say no for God. I said, okay. I was grateful for that advice. Even at the time, it was kind of confusing to me, but so we ended up getting married a couple weeks later, actually. And some of the things we worried about was, would the church reject us? Would we have to find a new church? Would the church reject their pastor, who, you see what's going on? But what we found was that our church was so graceful and compassionate towards us. We submitted ourselves to whatever was asked of us during that time. We remained in the church. We were celebrated by the church. Church threw us a wedding shower, and then actually not that many months later threw us a baby shower.
Yeah.
It was a tough season. You said kind of one of the worst things that could happen to you.
Yeah.
I was 18 years old, but I feel like it forced me to become a man. It forced me to become a husband. It forced me to become a father. So I had to navigate the waters of, okay, I'm enrolled in school full time, but I'm also having to work full time to support a growing family. And, it was a lot of adjustment for us. I'd never lived on my own or with anybody else other than my parents. And all of a sudden learning how to be, like how to share a house with a wife,
Sure.
like that actually has an opinion, somebody who thinks their own way, it's just like, wow, it was a lot during that season. But I'm so grateful, because the greatest worst thing that could ever happen to me. I mean, it was a mistake and a sin on our behalf, but it was one of the ways in which God brought so much blessing to us, in the form of showing us just how much we had to grow, and that He was with us in that growth.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an amazing story, because it's unfortunately unique the way the church came around you guys. I mean, you think this is, when it happens in a church, whether it's just a congregant or whatever, that's a big deal. When someone has a pregnancy outside of marriage, sex outside of marriage, obviously sin, and obviously that needs to be addressed and dealt with, and all of that. But man, when it's, the pastor's daughter, and one of the deacon's sons, and just that level of involvement in the church, it can really put shockwaves through the whole church. I'm sure it did in many ways.
Yeah.
But, I've been doing pro-life ministry since 2005, so about 20 years now. And I've been in front of abortion centers ministering to men. I've ministered to pastors' sons that are bringing their girlfriend for abortions. I've ministered to pastors' daughters that are coming for abortions or coming out of the clinic after having had abortions. And just one of the common themes that you hear is, well, if my church finds out, if my dad finds out, if my pastor finds out, if, whatever, the deacons find out, then they're going to bring me in front of the church and shame me. They're going to throw me out of the church. There's just all these things. Some of that actually may be true, and some of it, probably most of it, just lies from the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you struggled with that. I mean, it's been a while, but just kind of running your heart, your mind back to that moment. Was that some of the stuff that was swirling around in your mind?
What's interesting is, initially there's a lot of embarrassment and there's a lot of shame. Sure. But I would say that for me personally, I was so naive and so stupid, and my stupidity and naivete actually sheltered me probably from a lot of that stuff. Because, at the end of the day, I'm excited that I'm married. At the end of the day, even though it's not the order of events, I am elated that we're bringing a child into the world. And I was so busy. I mean, literally, I was in school full-time and I was working full-time, that I didn't even have time to think about what other people were thinking about me. If I sat down, that was a lucky moment. So I think some of the busyness of that season sheltered me from it. It wasn't until my wife, on the other hand, I think, she is definitely more sensitive to what others, she's more perceptive about others, and nuance and subtlety. Subtlety is not my strong point, but I think it really wasn't until, I think after, because we just started, we said, we have a kid, let's just keep having kids. So, we have 4 beautiful daughters, and, they're all about 2 years apart. And so it wasn't really until I think probably maybe like 10 years into our marriage where for us, we had just, because we were accepted by so many people, like and I know
Yeah.
there were people who got their knickers in a knot, or their, got to be in their bonnet about it all, and maybe
Sure.
left the church because, they didn't get, the response that they wanted. And it was not a small church, by the way, it's a church of over 1,000 people. And, so it's a fairly large community, but I think the fact that we were accepted along, we just kind of were like, well, okay, we just kind of muscled along, and it was like a topic we never really brought up, until really our kids were starting to get of the right age where they could understand this, like, hey, mom and dad, this is your 10th anniversary. Hey, I'm 10 years old. How does, and so it was never a secret, but it wasn't until we had to kind of deal with, but as a, kind of our story is that with it over the years, doors opened up for us in ministry. And so as a youth pastor, it was one of those things, like, I always felt like, man, I don't want to talk about this in front of the kids of our youth group, because I don't want them to think, oh, we can do that. And so it was kind of a don't ask, don't tell, until we really started to see that the testimony in the right place at the right time with the right people was really something that God could use to direct people, to encourage or comfort people. And I think it started to develop in our heart as a place of compassion for others. But yeah, I think in many ways God sheltered us from maybe some of the harsh and nasty side effects of our sin. And maybe it's because we were quick to turn. We were quick to, jump into a place of obedience in our disobedience. We were really overjoyed to have the response from our families, who just said, we love you no matter what, and we're going to support you no matter what. In fact, I think if it wasn't for the support of our parents, we'd be dead. We would have starved to death somewhere on the side of some road. Our parents and many wonderful, generous people in our church that just came alongside and mentored us and spoke to us things that maybe our parents had been saying all along, but when it comes from somebody else, your ears listen a little different. So yeah, God sheltered us, and I attribute that to the culture of our church was really one that was loving and accepting without compromising truth.
So yeah, man, that's amazing. Like I said, for me, from my view, super rare for a church to rally around a couple like your church rallied around you. And then, I'm not sure if there's another pastor that I know or have heard of that, you have that situation within your congregation, obviously, potential for a lot of upset. And then ultimately you become the pastor of that church. Like, that's
Honestly,
pretty amazing.
I say it's because God has a sense of humor or a sense of irony or all of the above. But yeah, I mean, we served here as youth pastors for about 10 years. And then we pastored one of our campuses for about 6 years. And then when my father-in-law announced his intention to retire to our board, they established a committee to find candidates. And they asked if, I still remember the day that one of our board members asked, hey, would you allow your name to be considered? And I laughed. I said, are you? I said, that's funny. Just kind of thinking of all of it. And we prayed about it and said, well, I guess so. And if you guys are crazy enough to consider us, then maybe we'll be crazy enough to allow you to. And eventually our congregation has a vote for their senior pastor. And when that congregational meeting took place and our congregation voted, they voted for us, and we'd never hid anything. I mean, we were in the open about all of that.
Sure.
And I think, and it's never something that I had ambition or pointed towards. I knew I, wanted to follow a path of ministry, but I always thought that this would, being as a staff pastor here at this church, would open up a door somewhere else. And I didn't know that this is kind of one of the things God had in store. But I mean, it is kind of funny and laughable, but I also see how much fruit God has brought about from us, because I think our heart and our story has given us a unique way to look at others with compassion whether they're single moms or, unwed or unplanned, pregnancies, ways that we as a church have intentionally rallied around, and, or ways in which we want to stand for life with a passion about it, seeing that our daughter Kalia, who's now 28 years old, and she is married, and she and her husband are both involved in ministry with a church that we helped plant about 6 years ago.
Yeah, wow.
I look at her and you just say that she so easily could have been discarded or aborted by a different circumstance or a different set of values. And you just go, okay, that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for the beauty of her life to be given a chance in other people's lives. And it's given us, I think, a unique way. Not that other pastors aren't even more passionate about pro-life than we are, who don't share our story, but for us, that's why that pro-life, conviction that we have is personal, because we don't just look at people who have abortions like, oh, these are bad people who made bad choices. We look at them like, this is us.
Sure.
But for the grace of God, that would be another level of trauma that we would be having to deal with. If we would have been more afraid of the shame that others would cast upon us than we would of discarding a life that God had planned, that would be our story. And so we just take it upon us to teach young people that life is precious and it begins in the womb, and it's a gift of God to bring that conviction to our city and to our congregation and to our school and to others. This is important.
Yeah, man. It's cool to see what God's done and what God is doing in you guys' congregation. I want to talk a little bit about the House of Refuge initiative and just the way that you guys have embraced that. And I know you shared a little bit before we started recording just how that's impacted your church. And I know you guys do a whole lot more than just Love Life stuff and House of Refuge, just one piece of what you guys are doing as a pro-life church. But share a little bit, maybe just some encouragement for other pastors that may be considering becoming a House of Refuge, standing for life in their community, and some of the ways that's impacted y'all.
That's cool. Well, we were introduced to the idea and the concept by Jared and Beth Burns, who Beth runs another pro-life network here in our area called Abundant Life. Yeah. And Jared serves with y'all at Love Life, kind of helping move our area and identify pastors. So they met with us and they described the mission of Love Life and the concept of what it means to be a church or a house of refuge. And really, when I heard the House of Refuge, initially what I heard was, hey, this is a way that your church, that you can articulate to your church just what your heart for pro-life is, and a way that you can articulate and arm your church with the information that if somebody in your congregation or community finds himself in an unplanned pregnancy, this is how we're going to respond. So initially it was, when we heard it, he says, would you guys consider it? I read the statement for the House of Refuge Church, and I just said, man, it feels like that statement could have been written in this house. It could have been written in our church. So right away, we identified with that statement. We said, these are the things, and essentially we started out by saying, we're going to officially take this step. We want to be known as a house of refuge, not just so that we can be a part of the broader Love Life kind of infrastructure, ecosystem, network, and family of churches, but really because I saw it as a way that it was like a way for just like bringing clarity to what does it look like as a pro-life church to win. And so, part of what we do is twice a year, we read to our church. We take, whether it's just in conjunction with where that Sunday is, or just say, hey, church, we want to bring you a reminder today that we are a house of refuge. And here's what that means. We read the statement. If you find yourself in an unplanned pregnancy, it means that we're a place you can run towards. We're not going to judge you or shame you. We are not going to affirm sin, and in no way can we encourage abortion, but we're going to come alongside you, do everything that we can to help support you bringing this life into the world, not only before, but even after. And people in our church, when they hear us read that statement, they know and say, oh, yeah, that's why we run that small group for single moms. Oh, that's why we are throwing baby showers for moms who are expecting that have chosen to give life, even though they're not married or even though they've come, you just go, oh, it's helping our church. That's why we do a pro-life march, a life chain every year out in our city with flags and banners, just pronouncing life is precious. Oh, yeah, that's why we're always acknowledging Sanctity of Human Life Sunday. That's why we're so strong in our partnerships with local CareNet of Puget Sound and other local crisis pregnancy centers. So for us, it was like, why wouldn't we become a house of refuge? We already are. It helps us sharpen that edge. So and I mean, every time we sit and meet with pastors that we see eye to eye on this issue, we say, hey, this is something that's been a real big win for us as a church, and I want to encourage you. I'll point you, towards connecting with somebody in our area that's or even this is what it means. Here's some of the information, and I just think that every church who has a heart for life, to sign up and to walk through the steps of becoming a house of refuge is going to help further that mission. Because then what we've discovered is, since we've been talking more and more about this through the grassroots of our congregation, people are saying they have their own ideas. Hey, we should start this kind of ministry, or maybe we should start praying about this. And we've just seen people kind of come up. Like we've got these ladies that are just passionate about running a small group to mentor single moms. So like these, we've got a ministry we're partnered with that we get referrals from local pregnancy clinics where moms choose life. They refer them to us. We run a parenting small group to teach them and equip them, and then our whole church rallies around. We throw a baby shower for them. Well, these all came up from the passionate people in our congregation who hear us say, we're a house of refuge. We're a pro-life place. They go, hey, we want to take that in this direction. It's just been awesome to see. I mean, from our youngest people, our middle schoolers and high schoolers are establishing Students for Life on their campuses. They're when we're doing our pro-life rallies in the city, they're the ones that want to be in the front of the line, waving the banner. They're the ones that are out there posting on social media. They're like, how can we be more involved? So, and I would say that we have facilitated the pro-life heart of people in our church by being willing to talk about it and publicly become a house of refuge. A lot of pastors, I think, feel like, well, I don't want to step on people's toes, and I don't want to push people away from our church. I think for us, it's really opened up some wonderful conversations, and it's really facilitated a lot of passion in our church. And yeah, we've had people, because we're not apologizing for our pro-life stance. We're pretty gung-ho about it with compassion. We've had people that have decided that this isn't the church for them.
Sure.
Maybe that's only for a time. Maybe the Lord is going to work on their heart and they'll come back around, or maybe not. I don't know. But to us, we have had way more growth and way more increase and way more facilitating ministry among our people because of becoming a house of refuge than what some would fear, like, well, we need to avoid this. I'd say, man, every pastor, get on lovelife.org and just jump in there, click on the House of Refuge, read that statement, and if it doesn't describe your heart, then walk away. Ask yourself why not. But if you're going, man, I think we believe that, we need to band together, churches of all denominations, of all ilks, non-denomination. But if this is one of these watershed issues, like, you can learn a lot about a church by what their stance on life is. And I think churches that are standing on life together, the House of Refuge model, one of the benefits to me is I can jump on the website and I can look, hey, who else in our area is signed on to this? And these are brothers and sisters in arms. We're like, this is who we can link up with.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's good, brother. I appreciate you sharing all of that. I know we got to wrap up. I know you got places to go and things to do. Before we wrap up, I want to mention you had signed the pastor pledge that we put out to many of our partnering pastors and pastors that don't yet partner with us. We have an opportunity to appeal to President Trump to defund Planned Parenthood. There's already been some defunding and some freezing of funding that goes from the federal government to Planned Parenthood. I think close to $700 million a year goes into Planned Parenthood in various ways. And it is unreal. It's insane that we would give money to that. I mean, people say, well, they don't use all of that money, or they don't use any of that money for abortions. But the reality is Planned Parenthood is the richest nonprofit on the face of the planet, and that money is used to bolster that so-called nonprofit. And at the end of the day, like, they're killing more children through abortion than any other entity on the face of the planet, and we should not be funding them. So that's kind of, God has given us an opportunity with Rob Pacienza. I don't know if you know who Pastor Rob Pacienza is, but he's a pastor down in South Florida, and he's going to be presenting these 1,000 or more pastors. How many pastors sign? We're going to just present those names to President Trump and say, hey, these pastors are saying, as a congregation, they are appealing to you, just like Daniel appealed to the king, just like Nehemiah appealed to the king, Ezra appealed to the king. They're appealing to you to defund this thing, but they're also making a pledge that they're going to stand as a place of refuge. And of course, you guys are doing that. I don't know if you have anything to share along those lines that would encourage other pastors.
Honestly, when I saw the appeal to sign the letter, I read the letter and the heartbeat of it, and I just think this is a no-brainer. And I think a lot of times people say, well, this is what I believe, but I don't want to put my name on it because I think it might expose us to scorn, or might expose us to people that might, hate us or otherwise. And it's important to just keep in mind, the devil hates you more than anybody on this planet can hate you. And, whether you signed a letter or not, the devil is looking to steal, kill, and destroy. And so really take the fear out of, what people might think about it. If you believe that Planned Parenthood should be defunded, every pastor should sign that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a tremendous opportunity. It's not a political move, but it is us saying to our political leaders, it's saying, hey, these are the spiritual realities that the church is founded upon. And we want to encourage you, because our heart is this, that we would create a country where all human life can flourish. The human life that happens to maybe go to our churches and agree with all of our statements of faith, and the human life that opposes us.
Yeah.
The flourishing of human life is the chief and primary concern of governance. And we as the church, we want to get behind that. We want to say to our leaders, and I would get behind signing that letter if it was going to have been presented to President Biden.
Sure.
Or if it was going to be presented to a Democratic leader somewhere. I think it falls on different ears based on political leanings, but it's the right thing. And we want to encourage. I think it's a pastor's responsibility to encourage our elected officials into the acts of righteousness.
Yeah.
Whether they're believers or not believers, whether you agree with them or not, whether you voted for them or not, we ought to be encouraging people into doing things that cause the flourishing of human life. So that's why I was gung-ho to sign it, because it describes that's what we want. I mean, when we heard the news that Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court, or turned back to the states, wow, praise God. We rejoiced at that.
Yeah.
But we recognized here in our democratic stronghold of a state, Washington, that it just meant now we have more work to do, and we're now the tip of the spear on this. And so we want to lean in any further. And I think part of it is creating at the federal level, the conditions for human flourishing, and working like the sun's going down on us at the grassroots level for human flourishing in our neighborhoods, in our schools, in our communities, and in our state. It's really on both ends. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a tremendous letter. I'm sure you guys I know you have links to it on your website, and people aren't on your email list. That's where I discovered it, is on your email list. And it's the right thing.
Pastorpledge.com. Guys that want to check it out or share it with your pastor, share it with other pastors that pastorpledge.com. Pretty simple. And yeah, man, appreciate you, Pastor Jay, signing that. Appreciate you sharing what you've shared. It's been super encouraging for me to hear your story. I know there's a lot that we can dig into. You shared a little bit about the lawsuit you guys are in the midst of. We won't dig into that, but want to encourage those that are listening to be praying for Cedar Park Church, be praying for Pastor Jay and Sandy and what they're going through on a legal level, and just be praying that they continue to stand for righteousness. I know they will, but that God will be with them as they stand for righteousness there in Washington State. And brother, I think I'm ready to wrap this up. If you're
awesome.
ready.
I appreciate it. What a great opportunity. You guys are doing a great job equipping churches like ours. to continue to take that stand. So thank you and the team for all that you do. And we count it a joy that we ran into the ministry of Love Life and are a part of furthering that. So keep up the good work.
Thank you, brother. Well, thank you guys for listening. You can reach out to us, info@lovelife.org. You can check out the Pastor Pledge at pastorpledge.com or .org, and you can check us out on the internet at lovelife.org and all of our social media and all of that stuff. We've got plenty of content out there for you guys to check out. But until next time, God bless.